the frozen winter of 800 AD, a Frankish warlord knelt before a pope in Rome and rose as Emperor of the Romans, an act so audacious that it split Christendom, rewrote the map of Europe, and planted the seed for every modern nation-state. Yet, 90% of his own chronicles were deliberately burned by his heirs to hide the blood price of that crown. What single secret did Charlemagne bury beneath the marble of Aachen that still stains the stones red when it rains? The snow fell like ash the night before Christmas in the year 800, muffling the tramp of iron-shod hooves as the Frankish host wound through the passes of the Alps toward the Eternal City. At their head rode a man whose shoulders had carried the weight of 30 campaigns, whose beard was already streaked with the gray of 50 winters, whose eyes, blue, cold, and unreadable, had stared down Saxon rebels, Lombard dukes, and the endless steppe horizons of the Avars. His name was Carolus, Charles in the vulgar tongue. Karl to the Germans, Charlemagne to the ages. He did not yet know that the crown he sought would be forged from the melted swords of his enemies and cooled in the blood of his friends. Rome greeted him with the smell of incense and rot. The Basilica of St. Peter rose above the Tiber like a wounded colossus, its columns patched with brick where marble had crumbled, its mosaics half-blind with soot. Inside, Pope Leo III waited, his face bruised from the mob that had tried to tear out his eyes the previous Easter. The two men had struck a bargain in the dark. Charles would restore the Pope's sight and throne. The Pope would give Charles a title no barbarian had worn since the fall of the West. But bargains with Rome are never simple, and the price is always paid in souls. The coronation itself lasted less than a minute. Charles knelt. Leo placed the crown, heavy, crude, studded with gems looted from Ravenna, upon his brow. The congregation roared, "Carolo Augusto, adeo coronato, magno et pacifico imperatori, vita et victoria." Life and victory to Charles Augustus, crowned by God, great and peaceful emperor. Peaceful. The word would have made the widows of Saxony laugh until they bled. But in that moment something irreversible happened. The Roman Empire, dead for 3 centuries, twitched in its grave. The Middle Ages began with a heartbeat, yet the crown was alive from the start. Charles had not come to Rome as a pilgrim but as a conqueror. His armies had carved a path of fire from the Elbe to the Ebro, from the North Sea to the Adriatic. 30,000 Saxons had been beheaded in a single day at Verdun because they refused to kneel to a foreign god. The Avars' treasure hoards, 9 wagon loads of gold and silver, had been melted down to gild the palace at Aachen. The Lombard's iron crown now rested in a chest beneath Charles's bed, wrapped in the scalp of its last king. Every mile of his empire was paved with bones, and every chronicle written in his name began with a prayer to forget. The court chronicler Einhard would later claim his master stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, a giant among men. The truth is more brutal. Charles was 5 feet 7 in his boots, but he wore the height of the dead. When he entered a room, men stepped back, not because of his stature, but because of the silence that followed him, the silence of widows, of orphans, of priests who had watched their churches burn. He spoke 9 languages, read Latin fluently, and could quote Augustine while dictating laws in Frankish. He bathed daily, a habit that shocked his nobles, and insisted his daughters learn to spin wool so they would never be helpless. He was a paradox, a warlord who wept at music, a tyrant who founded schools, a Christian who kept 4 wives and twice as many concubines. But let us begin where the story truly starts, not in Rome but in the forests of Saxony, where the first blood was spilled that would one day anoint an emperor. It was the year 772. Charles, 30 years old, rode at the head of 10,000 men into the shadow of the Teutoburg forest, where Varus had lost 3 legions to Arminius 8 centuries before. The Saxons had no legions, only spears and a god named Irminsul, a pillar of oak said to hold up the sky. Charles ordered it cut down. The tree took 3 days to fell. When it crashed, the sound was like the world ending. The Saxons fought with the fury of men defending their heavens. They lost. Charles took their sons as hostages, burned their villages, and rode south to celebrate Easter at Rome. But the Saxons did not forget. For 30 years they rose again and again, led by a chieftain named Widukind who refused to bow. Each rebellion was crushed harder than the last. In 782 at Verdun on the Aller River, Charles ordered the beheading of 4,500 Saxons in a single day. The river ran red for 3 days. Einhard, writing decades later, called it a necessary act of justice. The Saxon annals called it the blood court. Both are lies. It was genocide. Yet something strange happened in the aftermath. Charles began to dream of the oak pillar. Night after night, he saw it standing again, taller than before, its roots drinking the blood of the dead. He woke sweating, convinced the pagan gods were cursing him. He summoned bishops, demanded masses, ordered the construction of churches on every Saxon hill. He forced baptism at sword point, drowning infants in the same rivers where their fathers had been slaughtered. The Saxons called it the wet death. Charles called it salvation. The dream stopped, but the curse did not. By 785, Widukind surrendered. He was baptized in the cathedral at Attigny, Charles himself standing as godfather. The chroniclers say the Saxon chief wept. They do not say whether the tears were for his people or for the god he had betrayed. Widukind vanished from history after that, some say to a monastery, some say to the forests where he became a werewolf in the songs of his people. Charles never spoke his name again. With Saxony broken, the empire expanded like a plague. In 774, Charles crossed the Alps and crushed the Lombard kingdom in a campaign that lasted 6 months. Desiderius, the last Lombard king, was tonsured and imprisoned in a monastery at Corbie. His daughter Adalperga had been married to Charles's brother Charlemagne, who died mysteriously the same year. Poison, some whispered. Charles married Desiderius's other daughter, Hildegard, and fathered 9 children on her before she died at 26, worn out by childbirth and the weight of a crown she never wore. The Lombard treasure, silks, spices, gold, filled the vaults at Aachen. The Iron Crown of Lombardy, said to contain a nail from the true cross, was locked away. Charles never wore it. Some said it burned his hands. The Avars came next. Nomads from the steppes, heirs to the Huns, they had terrorized Europe for a century. In 791, Charles led a 3-pronged invasion into the Hungarian plain. The Avars' ring fortress, the Ring, was a city of wood and earth surrounded by 9 concentric walls. It took 3 years to reduce. When it fell, the loot was beyond counting. 15 wagon loads of gold, silver, and precious stones. Charles sent a portion to the Pope, a portion to his vassals, and the rest to Aachen, where it was melted into reliquaries and chalices. The Avars vanished as a people. Their Khagan was baptized and given a Frankish name. He died within a year, some say of shame. By 796, Charles controlled a territory larger than the Byzantine Empire. From the Atlantic to the Elbe, from the North Sea to the Adriatic, his writ ran. He issued capitularies, laws written in Latin that few could read, regulating everything from the price of bread to the proper way to baptize a slave. He founded schools in every cathedral town, forcing nobles to send their sons to learn letters. He invited scholars from Ireland, Italy, Spain, and Visigothic Septimania. Alcuin of York taught him grammar. Paul the Deacon wrote his history. Einhard measured his buildings. They called it the Carolingian Renaissance. The peasants called it hunger, for every manuscript required the skin of 100 calves, and every calf was food they would not eat. But the empire was a house of cards balanced on the edge of a sword. Charles's sons quarreled like wolves. Pippin the Hunchback, his eldest, plotted rebellion and was tonsured and imprisoned for life. Charles the Younger, the favorite, died of a stroke at 36. Louis the Pious, the only surviving heir, was a monkish man who wept at tournaments. The daughters, Rotrud, Bertha, Gisela, were pawns in diplomacy. Rotrud was betrothed to the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VI, then unbetrothed when the alliance soured. Bertha bore 2 sons to a courtier named Angilbert and was never married. Gisela was sent to a nunnery. Charles loved them fiercely, taught them to ride and read, but would not let them marry lest their husbands claim his throne. Incest rumors swirled. The chronicles deny them. The songs do not. In 806, Charles issued the Divisio Regnorum, dividing the empire among his 3 legitimate sons. Charles the Younger was to have Francia and Neustria, Pippin Italy and Bavaria, Louis Aquitaine and the Spanish March. Saxony was to be split like a carcass. The document was written in triplicate, sealed with gold, and sent to the Pope for blessing. 3 years later, Charles the Younger was dead. Pippin followed in 810, struck down by plague in Italy. Louis inherited everything. The Divisio was burned. The empire held its breath. The court at Aachen was a city within a city. The palace complex covered 23 acres, a chapel octagon modeled on Ravenna, a throne room where Charles sat on a marble seat salvaged from Pavia, a swimming pool fed by hot springs where he swam naked with his guards. The great hall was hung with tapestries depicting Alexander the Great, Charles's hero, and the walls were painted with scenes of his victories. A bronze equestrian statue, looted from Ravenna, stood in the courtyard. Charles called it Theodoric, but rode past it every day without looking. The palace was heated by hippocausts, lit by oil lamps, and guarded by men who spoke a dozen tongues. Messengers arrived daily from the ends of the earth, a lion from the Caliph of Baghdad, an elephant from Harun al-Rashid that died in a snowstorm outside Verona, a water clock from the same Caliph that chimed the hours in Greek. Charles's days were regimented like a campaign. He rose at dawn, heard mass, dictated letters, judged disputes, inspected troops, swam, dined, and worked until midnight. He ate sparingly, roast meat, bread, wine diluted with water, and despised drunkenness. He wore the plain Frankish tunic, cross-gartered leggings, and a sheepskin coat in winter. Only on feast days did he don silk and jewels. He spoke slowly, in short sentences, and never raised his voice. When angry, he grew quiet. Men preferred his shouting. His wives came and went like seasons. Himiltrud the first bore Pippin the hunchback and was set aside. Desiderata, the Lombard princess, lasted a year and was returned to her father with a polite letter. Hildegard, the Swabian noblewoman, gave him 9 children and died at 26. Fastrada, the East Frankish beauty, was cruel and ambitious. She died suddenly, some say poisoned. Luitgard, the Alemannian, was gentle and childless. She died of fever. After her, Charles took concubines, Madelgard, Gerswinda, Regina, Adelind. Each bore children who were legitimized but never heirs. The court whispered that he could not sleep alone, that the ghosts of the dead kept him company. In 813, Charles summoned Louis to Aachen. The emperor was 71, his hands trembling, his eyes clouded with cataracts. He had not ridden to war in 10 years. The empire was at peace, but the peace was a graveyard. He crowned Louis co-emperor in the chapel, placing the crown on his son's head with his own hands. Then he retired to his bedchamber and waited for death. It came on January 28, 814, after 9 days of fever. His last words, according to Einhard, were, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." According to the Saxon songs, he cried out for Widukind. He was buried the same day in the chapel at Aachen, beneath a marble slab inscribed with his name and titles. No mound, no pyramid, just a stone in the floor. The empire he had built began to crack before the earth was cold. Louis the Pious quarreled with his nephews, the sons of Pippin the Hunchback's rebellion. The Saxons rose again. The Danes raided the coasts. The Moors crossed the Pyrenees. Within 30 years, the empire was split into 3 kingdoms by the Treaty of Verdun. Within a century, the Carolingian line was extinct in the male line. The crown Charles had worn passed to Otto the Great, then to 1,000 petty kings, then to the dust. But the story does not end there. In 1165, Frederick Barbarossa had Charles canonized as a saint. In 1349, Charles IV of Bohemia opened the tomb to retrieve relics and found the emperor's body seated on a throne, crowned, scepter in hand, his beard grown through the marble slab. In 1861, Napoleon III ordered the tomb opened again. The bones were measured, the crown weighed, the legend certified. In 1988, archaeologists found a mass grave beneath the cathedral containing the skeletons of 4,500 men, their skulls separated from their bodies. The Verdun massacre, confirmed at last, and still the questions remain. Why did Charles burn the royal annals after his death? What was written in the lost Palatine Codex that Einhard replaced with his sanitized Vita? Why did he never wear the Iron Crown of Lombardy? What happened to the nail from the true cross? And why, every Christmas Eve, do the bells of Aachen ring without human hands? The empire is gone. The palace is a museum. The chapel stands, but the throne is empty. Yet in the crypt beneath the marble slab, something waits. The guides will tell you it is only dust. The old women of Aachen will tell you otherwise. They say that on the night of the winter solstice, when the snow falls like ash, the emperor rises. He walks the corridors in his sheepskin coat, his beard white as frost, his eyes blue and cold. He carries no sword, only a book bound in human skin. He opens it to a page stained red, and he reads the names of the dead. Then he weeps, because even emperors cannot undo what has been done. And if you stand in the chapel at midnight, you can hear him. Not with your ears, but with your bones. He is asking a question. The same question he asked the Pope in 800 AD. The same question he asked Widukind in 785. The same question he asks every soul who kneels before the altar of history. Was it worth it? What do you think, viewer? In the comments below, tell me, if you could ask Charlemagne one question across the gulf of 12 centuries, what would it be? And would you dare to hear the answer? The marble slab was cold against the archbishop's cheek when he pressed it to the floor in 1000 AD, exactly 200 years after the coronation, swearing he heard a voice beneath the stone counting in Frankish. The voice stopped at 4,500 and began again. The archbishop fled, but the count followed him into his dreams, and he wrote it down in a margin of the cathedral's necrology. Numerus accessorum, numerus peccatorum. The number of the slain is the number of the sins. He was found dead the next morning, his quill still wet, the ink smeared across the page like blood. The necrology vanished. The count remained. In the scriptorium above the chapel, monks copied Einhard's Vita Caroli Magni by candlelight, their breaths fogging the air, their fingers black with gall ink. They were forbidden to add, forbidden to subtract, forbidden to question. Yet one monk, Brother Adalbert, barely 20, his scalp still raw from the tonsure, noticed a discrepancy. Einhard claimed Charlemagne died peacefully after receiving the sacraments. The palace day book, locked in an iron chest, recorded something else. 9 days of fever, delirium, cries in Saxon, a final convulsion so violent the bed frame cracked. Adalbert copied the daybook in secret, hiding the pages inside a psalter. When the abbot discovered the theft, Adalbert was walled alive in the crypt. His skeleton was found in 1923, the psalter still clutched to his chest, the pages fused by damp and time. Only one line remained legible, Imperator locutus est cum mortuis. The emperor spoke with the dead spoke back. In 814, the year of Charlemagne's burial, a comet blazed across the sky for 7 nights. The court astrologer, a Visigoth named Samuel, predicted civil war. He was flogged for paganism and exiled to the Spanish March, where he vanished. In 817, Louis the Pious dreamed his father rose from the tomb, crowned in fire, and struck him across the face with a scepter. Louis woke with a bruise shaped like the imperial eagle. In 840, the year Louis died, the tomb sweated blood. The phenomenon was recorded by Nithard, Charles's grandson, in his histories. Sanguis de lapide fluxit, et odor mortis implivit capellam. Blood flowed from the stone, and the stench of death filled the chapel. The blood was tested in 1874 by a Prussian chemist who declared it human, type unknown. The report was suppressed. The stain remains, darker when it rains, but the true secret was not in the tomb. It was in the reliquary. In 807, Charlemagne ordered a golden chest fashioned to hold the most sacred relics of the empire, a fragment of the true cross, a thorn from the crown, a tooth of John the Baptist, and something else, something wrapped in silk the color of dried blood, sealed with wax impressed by the imperial signet. The chest was placed beneath the altar of the Palatine Chapel, chained to the rock with links forged from Saxon swords. Only 3 keys existed, one held by the emperor, one by the Archbishop of Cologne, one buried with Einhard. When Einhard died in 840, his key was not found. The chest was never opened again, until 997. Otto III, barely 17, obsessed with his Carolingian blood, descended into the crypt with a blacksmith and a priest. They broke the chain. The chest was empty except for a single sheet of vellum, blackened by fire, but still legible. It was a letter in Charlemagne's own hand, written in Frankish runes no scholar could fully translate. The Latin gloss added later read, Quod feci pro gloria Dei, sed gloria mea fuit cruor. Si filius meus legit sciat pretium coronae. What I did for the glory of God, but my glory was blood. If my son reads this, let him know the price of the crown. Beneath the text was a list of names, 4,500 names, written in columns, each crossed out in red. At the bottom a single line, Widukind ultimus. Widukind the last. Otto wept. He ordered the chest resealed, the chain reforged, the letter burned. But the priest, a Saxon named Bruno, memorized the runes. He fled to Corvey Abbey and wrote them in the margin of a gospel book. The book was discovered in 1534 by a Lutheran pastor who recognized the names, Every Man Beheaded at Verden. The pastor published a pamphlet titled Das Blutbad von Verden. The pamphlet was burned, the pastor hanged, the gospel book vanished. It resurfaced in 1945 in the library of a bombed-out castle in Thuringia, the margins annotated in a child's hand. Großvater hat gelogen. Grandfather lied. The lie was older than the empire. In 791, during the Avar campaign, Charlemagne's scouts captured a nomadic shaman who claimed to serve the Sky Wolf. The shaman carried a leather tube containing a map drawn on human skin, showing the Carpathians, the Danube, and a mountain marked with a wolf's head. At the center was a circle of stones and a warning in Avar script, Qui entra, non exit. He who enters does not leave. Charlemagne laughed, ordered the map copied, and sent the original to Aachen. The copy was lost. The original was locked in the reliquary chest wrapped around the silk bundle. When Otto opened the chest, the map was gone. Only the silk remained, stained with a handprint too large for any human. The handprint belonged to the guardian. In the forests of the Harz, where the Saxons once worshipped Irminsul, old women still speak of the Waldkönig, the forest king. He is taller than the oaks, bearded with moss, crowned with antlers. He carries an axe made from a fallen star and speaks in the voice of thunder. Every century, on the night of the winter solstice, he walks the old Roman road to Aachen. The dogs howl. The bells ring without hands. The emperor rises to meet him. They speak in a language older than Latin, older than Frankish. Then the Waldkönig returns to the forest, and the emperor sleeps again. The old women say the guardian was once a man, Widukind's son, baptized against his will, cursed to wander until the blood debt is paid. The blood debt was codified in the Capitulare de Partibus Saxoniae, the harshest law Charlemagne ever issued. It prescribed death for any Saxon who refused baptism, who ate meat during Lent, who cremated their dead, who hid in the forests. The law was enforced by missi dominici, pairs of enforcers, one churchman, one noble, who rode circuits with a retinue of armed men. They carried a book of names. Every village had a quota. Failure meant fire. The missi kept records in wax tablets, then transcribed them into codices. Most codices were destroyed in the Viking raids of the 9th century. One survived, hidden in a monastery in Fulda. It was discovered in 1798 by a French revolutionary who used its pages to light his pipe. The last page, miraculously intact, listed the final quota. Anno Domini 804, Villa Irminsi, Infantes 25 Feminae L, Viri Nulli. In the year of our Lord 804, village of Irminsi, 25 infants, 50 women, no men. The men were already dead. They had marched into the forest in 804, led by a chieftain named Hesse, carrying the rebuilt Irminsul on their shoulders. They vanished. Charlemagne sent a legion to find them. The legion returned without spears, without shields, without tongues. They were executed for cowardice. The forest was declared terra damnata, cursed ground. No Frank entered it again. But the Saxons did. Every year on the feast of St. John, they left offerings at the edge of the trees. Bread, salt, a lock of hair. The offerings were gone by morning. The birds did not sing. In 814, the year Charlemagne died, a child was born in the forest. He had blue eyes and a birthmark shaped like an eagle. The Saxons called him Carlman, Little Charles. They hid him in a charcoal burner's hut, taught him the old songs, the old gods. When he was 16, he walked out of the forest carrying a spear made from the rebuilt Irminsul. He killed a Frankish tax collector, took his horse, and rode west. No one saw him again. But in 830, a rebel leader named Nithard, same name as Charlemagne's grandson, but no relation, rose in Saxony. He carried a spear of oak, spoke with a voice like thunder, and called himself the Waldkönig's herald. He was captured, blinded, and hanged. His body vanished from the gallows. The spear was never found. The spear resurfaced in 1349 during the Black Death. A flagellant procession in Aachen carried it aloft, wrapped in black cloth. The flagellants claimed it had been sent by St. Charles to punish the world for forgetting Verden. They whipped themselves until their backs were raw, then marched into the cathedral and laid the spear on the altar. The archbishop ordered it burned. The fire would not take. The spear was locked in the treasury. In 1794, French revolutionaries broke open the treasury and found the spear gone. In its place was a single oak leaf, green in winter. The leaf was the key. In the Palatine Library, behind a false panel in the astronomy tower, Einhard had hidden a second codex. It was bound in wolfskin, written in cipher, and titled De Arbor et Sanguine, on the tree and the blood. The cipher was broken in 1923 by a Jesuit paleographer named Father Kirsch. The text was a dialogue between Charlemagne and an unnamed Saxon druid. The druid offered a bargain: spare the forest, and the blood debt would be paid in time, not in lives. Charlemagne refused. The druid cursed him. Thy crown shall be thy chain, thy seed shall devour itself, thy name shall be a wound that never heals. Charlemagne laughed, ordered the druid flayed, and wore his skin as a cloak. The cloak was buried with him. The curse was not. The curse manifested in the bloodline. Pippin the Hunchback rebelled in 785 and was imprisoned for life. His son Bernard rebelled in 817 and was blinded, dying 3 days later. Louis the Pious's sons, Lothar, Pippin, Louis the German, Charles the Bald, fought the civil war of 840-843, carving the empire into strips. Lothar's son Louis II died childless. Pippin's son Pippin II was executed by Charles the Bald. Louis the German's sons quarreled over Bavaria. Charles the Bald's son Carloman was gored by a boar while hunting. The boar's tusks were mounted in the cathedral at Reims. They dripped blood for a year. By 987, the Carolingian line was extinct in the male line. The crown passed to Hugh Capet, a Frankish noble with no blood tie to Charlemagne. But the blood did not forget. In the Black Forest, a family of charcoal burners kept a secret. They were tall, blue-eyed, left-handed. They spoke a dialect no linguist could place. They married only among themselves. Their children were born with the eagle birthmark. They called themselves De Carling, the Carls. In 1848, during the revolutions, a young man named Karl von Hartz led a peasant uprising in Saxony. He carried a spear of oak, spoke with a voice like thunder, and was shot by Prussian troops. His body vanished. The spear was never found. The spear is the thread. It connects Verdun to Aachen, the forest to the throne, the blood to the crown. In 1968, a team of East German archaeologists excavating the Irminsul site found a pit containing 25 infant skeletons and 50 female skeletons arranged in a circle around a charred oak stump. The stump was carbon dated to 804 AD. The skeletons showed signs of ritual decapitation. The report was classified. The pit was filled with concrete. The stump was cut into pieces and sent to museums under the label Viking Artifact. One piece ended up in the basement of the Aachen Cathedral Museum, mislabeled as a 12th century reliquary fragment. It is still there, black with age, smelling faintly of smoke. The smell is the warning. Every Christmas Eve, the cathedral guards report the same phenomenon. The air grows heavy, the temperature drops, the scent of burning oak fills the crypt. The marble slab trembles. The chains on the reliquary chest rattle. The emperor is restless. In 1999, a guard named Klaus Becker stayed after closing to investigate. He was found at dawn, sitting on the chapel floor, staring at the altar. His hair had turned white. He could not speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he said only, "Zählt noch immer." He is still counting. The count is almost complete. In the Palatine archives, a document surfaced in 2012, sold at auction by a descendant of the Hartz family. It was a fragment of the lost Palatine Codex, written in Einhard's hand, but not in his style. It described a ritual performed in 813, the year before Charlemagne's death. The emperor, racked by fever, ordered a mass for the souls of the Verdun dead. The mass was held in the forest, at the site of the rebuilt Irminsul. 4,500 candles were lit, one for each victim. The emperor knelt, barefoot in the snow, and spoke the names. When he reached the last name, Widukind, he faltered. The candles went out. A wind rose, carrying the sound of axes. The emperor wept. The ritual was never completed. The fragment ends with a prophecy. Quando ultimum nomen pronunciabitur, imperator resurget, et sanguis redibit ad terram. When the last name is spoken, the emperor will rise and the blood will return to the earth. The prophecy is dated January 1st, 814. Charlemagne died 27 days later. The last name is the key. In the Black Forest, the Carling family keeps a book. It is bound in wolfskin, written in blood, and contains 499 names. The 4,500th name is blank. The family elders say the name must be spoken by one of Charlemagne's blood on the site of Verdun at the hour of his death. Then the curse will end. The empire will fall. The forest will reclaim its own. The Carlings are dying out. The last male heir, a boy named Carl, was born in 1999 with the eagle birthmark. He lives in a village near the Harz, speaks no German, only the old dialect. He dreams of axes and snow. On Christmas Eve 2025, he will turn 26. The winter solstice falls on December 21st. The hour of Charlemagne's death was 9 a.m. The site of Verdun is now a parking lot outside a supermarket, but the river still runs red when it rains. The emperor is waiting. The guardian is watching. The count is almost complete. What will you do, viewer, when the last name is spoken? Will you stand in the parking lot at 9 a.m. on December 21st, 2025, and listen for the sound of axes? Will you dare to speak the name? The boy Karl von Harz had never seen a city until the night he ran. He was 16, barefoot in the snow, the eagle birthmark burning like a brand beneath his left collarbone. Behind him, the charcoal burner's hut blazed. His mother had set it alight with her own hand, screaming in the old tongue that the Franks must not find the book. He carried nothing but the wolfskin codex pressed to his chest, and the oak-handled knife his grandfather had pressed into his palm. The knife was warm as though it had a heart. He ran until the trees closed behind him and the fire was only a red eye in the dark. Then he walked, following the pull of the mark, west and north, toward the river where the counting had begun. He reached Verdun at dawn on the Feast of St. John, 2015. The supermarket car park was empty, the tarmac slick with frost. He knelt where the blood court had stood and pressed his forehead to the ground. The knife vibrated. Beneath the concrete he felt the pulse of 4,500 throats cut in a single day. He whispered the first name on the list, Alfbald, and the frost melted in a perfect circle around his knees. A crow landed, cocked its head, and spoke with his mother's voice. "Not yet, Carlman. The hour is wrong." Then it flew away and the circle froze again. He stood, wiped his eyes, and walked into the town. No one noticed the barefoot boy with snow in his hair and an ancient book under his arm. The curse was patient. He lived rough for 3 years, sleeping in church porches, stealing bread, learning German from television sets and shop windows. The eagle mark never faded. It grew, spreading tendrils across his shoulder like black ivy. At night he dreamed of the forest chapel, a circle of oaks, an altar of black stone, the wolfskin book open on a lectern carved from the stump of Irminsul. In the dream he was old, bearded, crowned with antlers. He spoke the names, and with each name a candle went out. When the last candle died, the emperor rose from the marble slab and embraced him like a son. Then the dream changed. The emperor's face melted, revealing the skull of a wolf, and the embrace became a strangling. He woke gasping, the knife clenched in his fist, the blade wet with his own blood. In 2018 he found work as a gravedigger in Aachen. The cathedral cemetery was full, but the city still needed holes for the newly dead. He learned to swing a pick, to measure depth, to lower coffins without looking at the faces. The other diggers called him Der Stille, the silent one, because he never spoke unless spoken to, and even then only in monosyllables. They did not see the eagle beneath his shirt, or the way his shadow sometimes lagged behind him, as though reluctant to follow. On his first Christmas Eve in the city, he slipped into the Palatine Chapel after closing. The guards were drunk on Glühwein. The security cameras were old and blind in the corners. He descended to the crypt, knelt before the marble slab, and pressed the knife to the stone. The blade sank an inch, as though into butter. Blood welled, his blood, or the stone's, he could not tell. He whispered the second name, Barrow, and the chains on the reliquary chest rattled like bones in a sack. A voice, vast and hollow, answered from beneath the altar, "Noch nicht Erbe," not yet heir. He withdrew the knife, wrapped the wound in his shirt, and left before the guards sobered. The wound never healed. It scabbed, cracked, bled again. By 2020 it had spread into a perfect circle the size of a communion host, the skin around it black as charcoal. The doctor at the free clinic wanted to amputate the arm. Carl refused. He quit the cemetery, took a job night cleaning the cathedral museum, and began to study. The wolfskin codex was written in 3 layers, Frankish runes on the surface, Latin gloss beneath, and a third script, angular, sharp, older than both, that hurt to look at. He copied it onto butcher paper with a ballpoint pen, hiding the pages inside cleaning buckets. The third script was a map, not of land but of time, It showed the years as a spiral, each coil a century, the center marked with a wolf's head devouring its own tail. The spiral ended in 2025. At the point of ending was a single word in the old tongue, Heimkehr, homecoming. He needed help to read it. In the university library, he found an old woman shelving books in the paleography section. Her name was Dr. Elizabeth von Hohenstein, retired professor of medieval languages, great-granddaughter of the Prussian chemist who tested Charlemagne's blood in 1874. She wore her hair in a braid tight as a whip, and her eyes were the pale blue of glacier ice. She noticed Carl because he never checked out books. He only copied furiously in the margins of scrap paper. One day she left a note in his bucket. "If you want to understand the spiral, meet me at closing." "Bring the wound." He went. She locked the library doors, led him to the rare books room, and unwrapped his arm without flinching. The black circle had grown to the size of a saucer, the skin beneath translucent, veins pulsing like roots. She traced the runes with a gloved finger and whispered, "Du bist der Letzte." You are the last. She taught him in secret, after hours, in the locked stacks that smelled of dust and candle wax. She had her own copy of the lost Palatine Codex, photostat smuggled out of East Germany in 1989, hidden in a hollowed-out breviary. Together they translated the third script. It was a liturgy, not a map, a ritual to unbind the curse. It required 4 things: the wolfskin book, the oak-handled knife, the blood of the air, and the tongue of the emperor. The tongue was the problem. Charlemagne's body had been examined in 1000. 165, 349, 861, 1988. Every time the tomb was opened, the inventories listed the same relics: crown, scepter, gospel book, purple robe, sword, no tongue. Elizabeth believed it had been removed in 814, the night of the burial, and hidden separately. The Capitulate de Villis, Charlemagne's estate law, contained a cryptic clause: "Lingua regis in loco secreto servitur, neumquam loquatur contra nos." Let the king's tongue be kept in a secret place, lest it ever speak against us. The clause was struck from later copies. Elizabeth had found it in a 9th century fragment at Fulda. They searched for the tongue the way medieval monks searched for the Grail. Elizabeth had access to cathedral archives, Karl to the underground. He befriended the night watchmen, the restorers, the organ tuner who smoked hash in the triforium. He learned the palace's secret passages: a stair behind the tapestry of Alexander, a tunnel from the treasury to the hot springs, a shaft that dropped from the throne room into the crypt. On All Saints' Eve 2021 he found it. Behind a loose stone in the hypocaust beneath the swimming pool, wrapped in silk rotted to threads, was a walnut-sized lump of desiccated flesh pierced with a golden needle. The tongue. It was warm. When he touched it, it twitched, and he heard the emperor's voice, not in his ears but in his marrow, counting: 4,499, 4,500, 4,499, 4,500. Then silence. He brought it to Elizabeth in a Tupperware lined with salt. She wept without sound, the first time he had seen her lose composure. They performed a test, a drop of his blood on the tongue. It absorbed the blood like a sponge, swelled, turned pink. The counting resumed, faster now, a drumbeat in their skulls. They had until the winter solstice 2025. After that, the spiral closed and the ritual could never be performed again. The empire would stand forever, built on unquiet bones. They needed the 4th element: the site. Verdun was paved over, the river culverted, the blood court a little parking lot. But the earth remembered. Elizabeth discovered a 10th century charter granting the Carling family ius sepulturae, right of burial, in a clearing deep in the Harz, coordinates matching the 3rd script's spiral endpoint. The clearing was still there, unmarked on modern maps, reachable only by foot. Satellite images showed a perfect circle of oaks, 33 meters in diameter, the stump of Irminsul at the center. The German government had declared it a nature reserve in 1973. No paths led in. No signs marked the boundary. Hikers who entered were found days later babbling about wolves with human eyes. Carl went alone in August 2025. He carried the wolfskin book, the knife, the tongue in a lead box, and a rucksack of salt and iron filings. The forest swallowed him at dusk. The trees were older than the empire, their trunks scarred with runes no axe had touched since 804. He walked for 3 days without seeing sky. On the 4th morning he reached the clearing. The oaks formed a perfect ring, their branches interlaced like the vaulting of a cathedral. At the center stood the stump, black as obsidian, 9 feet high, split down the middle. From the split grew a sapling, straight and pale, its leaves blood-red even in summer. The altar stone lay before it, slick with dew that never dried. He knelt, opened the book, and began to speak the names. He spoke for 7 days and 7 nights without sleep. His voice gave out on the 3rd day. He continued in a whisper, then in thought. The candles he lit, one for each name, burned without consuming wax. The forest creatures gathered, stag, boar, wolf, raven. They did not move. On the 7th night the sapling flowered, crimson blossoms opening like wounds. The earth trembled. The stump cracked wider, revealing a hollow filled with ash and tiny bones, infants, women. The quota of 804. From the hollow rose a wind that smelled of rivers and iron. The tongue in the lead box began to swell, pressing against the lid. Carl opened the box. The tongue leapt into his hand, hot as a coal. He placed it on the altar. It spoke the final name, Widukind, in Charlemagne's voice. The clearing exploded with light. The oaks bowed. The sapling shot upward, becoming in an instant the reborn Irminsul, taller than any tree in Europe. Its roots burst through the altar, coiling around Carl's ankles, gentle as a mother's arms. The wolfskin book burst into flame, the pages rising as white ashes that spelled the names in the air before dissolving. The knife melted, the gold needle running like tears. Carl felt the eagle mark tear open, blood pouring from his chest in a single perfect stream. It struck the roots and was drunk. The counting stopped. Then the emperor came. He stepped out of the tree as though it were a door, barefoot, bearded, crowned with oak leaves. His eyes were blue and cold, but they were not cruel. He wore the plain Frankish tunic, stained with old blood at the hem. In his right hand, he carried the iron crown of Lombardy, the nail from the true cross glinting black. In his left he held the scepter broken at Verdun. He looked at Carl, really looked, and smiled the way a father smiles at a son who has come home after long wandering. "Du hast gezählt," he said. "You have counted." Carl could not speak. His throat was raw, his chest a hollow cave. The emperor knelt, placed the crown on Carl's head, it fit perfectly, and pressed the scepter into his hand. It was light as a reed. "Die Schuld ist bezahlt," the emperor whispered. "The debt is paid." The roots released Carl. The emperor stood, turned to the tree, and walked into it. The bark closed behind him without a seam. The crown dissolved into rust, the scepter into ash. The Irminsul shrank, becoming the sapling again, its leaves green now, ordinary. The candles guttered out. The animals dispersed. Dawn broke, pink and quiet. Carl was alone with the altar and the book's ashes. He gathered the ashes into the lead box, closed it, and buried it beneath the sapling. He marked the spot with the oak-handled knife's melted hilt. Then he walked out of the forest the way he had come. The trees parted. The path was clear. He emerged at dusk on December 21st, 2025, exactly 12 centuries after the coronation. His chest was whole, the eagle mark gone, only a faint white scar in its place. He was 26 years old and had no name for what he had become. He went to Aachen one last time. The cathedral was packed for the Christmas Mass. He slipped into the crypt during the Agnus Dei. The marble slab was warm. The chains on the reliquary chest were rusted through, the lock sprung. Inside was the silk bundle, empty now, the handprint faded to a shadow. He left the lead box on the altar. On the lid he scratched a single rune, Heimkehr. Then he walked out into the snow and did not look back. The empire did not fall. Nations did not crumble. History books recorded no earthquake, no miracle. But something changed. In Verdun, the supermarket car park flooded every Christmas Eve. The water red as wine, smelling faintly of iron. In the hearts, the sapling grew an inch every year, its roots cracking the concrete of forgotten bunkers. In Aachen, the bells rang once at 9 a.m. on December 25th, without human hands. The guards no longer drank Glühwein. Children born after 2025 in the old Carolingian lands were left-handed, blue-eyed, born with a faint white scar shaped like an eagle over the heart. They dreamed of forests and counting, but when they woke, they could not remember the names. Carl von Hartz vanished. Some say he took a train to Lisbon and a ship to Brazil. Some say he became a hermit in the Alps. Some say he walks the old Roman roads at night barefoot, carrying neither book nor knife, only the silence of the paid debt. The Carling family died with him. The last elder, his great-aunt, was found dead in her chair on Christmas morning 2025. A smile on her lips, the wolfskin codexes binding in her lap, empty of pages. The ritual was complete. The curse was lifted. The emperor sleeps. The forest is quiet. The counting is done. But every year on the winter solstice, a single oak leaf falls in the Palatine Chapel. It is green in winter, veined with red. The guides sweep it up and burn it. The ashes smell of rivers and iron, and somewhere, a child wakes from a dream of axes and snow, touches the scar over their heart, and whispers a name they do not know they know. The story is not over. It has only changed shape. What will you do with the leaf when it falls for you? The leaf fell first in Strasbourg, not Aachen. It was January 1st, 2026, the first day of the new year, and the European Parliament was in session. A janitor named Mireille Dubois found it on the marble floor of the hemicycle, directly beneath the seat reserved for the president of the commission. It was green, veined with red, warm to the touch. She slipped it into her pocket, thinking it a prank. By noon, her fingers were stained crimson. By nightfall, the stain had spread up her arm in the shape of a spreading oak. She went to the hospital. The doctors cut away the skin. The leaf grew back beneath the bandage, larger, its edges serrated like a saw. On the third day, she spoke in a voice not her own, deep, slow, Frankish. She recited the Capitulare de Partibus Saxoniae from memory, word for word, though she had never studied Latin. On the fourth day, she vanished from the locked ward. The leaf was gone. The bandage was soaked in blood that smelled of rivers. The second leaf fell in Brussels, on the desk of the NATO Secretary General during a briefing on Russian troop movements. It landed on a satellite image of the Kaliningrad exclave, covering the word Verden, written in red marker by an analyst who had no memory of writing it. The Secretary General, a Dutch general with no patience for mysticism, crushed the leaf in his fist. The juice burned through his glove, through the skin, into the bone. He screamed. The briefing room emptied. When security returned, the general was on his knees, tracing runes in his own blood on the tabletop. The runes spelled Heimkehr. The leaf was intact, pulsing like a heart. They sealed it in a lead-lined box and flew it to Porton Down. The box arrived empty. The leaf was later found in the cockpit of the transport plane, stuck to the pilot's visor. The pilot landed safely, but spoke only Saxon for the rest of his life. By spring, the leaves were falling everywhere the Carolingian writ had once run. In Paris, one drifted through the open window of the Élysée Palace and landed in the president's coffee. He drank it without noticing. That night, he dreamed of 4,500 headless men marching down the Champs-Élysées, their stumps dripping onto the cobblestones. He woke with the taste of iron in his mouth and a scar shaped like an eagle over his heart. In Rome, a leaf lodged in the mouth of the Laocoon statue in the Vatican museums. The marble priest's scream became audible for the first time in 2 millennia, a low, continuous keen that shattered every wineglass in the cafeteria. In Vienna, a leaf blocked the exhaust of the president's limousine. The engine overheated, the car exploded, the president survived with the scar. In Warsaw, Budapest, Ljubljana, every capital of the old Regnum Francorum, the leaves fell, and the children of the scar were born. They were born in 2026. All on the same day, December 21st, the winter solstice. 9,400,500 infants, exactly one for every soul counted at Verden and in the forest. Their mothers remembered nothing of the birth except a green flash and the smell of oak. The fathers, if present, spoke of a wind that blew inward, from the baby to the world. The children opened their eyes, blue, cold, unreadable, and did not cry. Their left hands were clenched into fists. When pried open, each contained a single oak seed, warm and pulsing. The seeds were confiscated by governments, studied, burned, buried. They sprouted anyway overnight into saplings that cracked hospital foundations, sewer lines, metro tunnels. The saplings bore leaves veined with red. The leaves fell. The cycle began again. The children grew fast. By age 3, they spoke fluent Latin, Frankish, and the local tongue. They refused meat, bathed daily, and drew maps of an empire that had not existed for 1,000 years. They recognized each other across playgrounds, train stations, refugee camps. When two met, they touched scars and spoke a single word, Heimkehr. Then they walked away, never to meet again. Governments tried to separate them, institutionalize them, study them. The children vanished from locked rooms, reappeared in forests, on mountain tops, in the ruins of Carolingian palaces. They left no footprints, only leaves. In Strasbourg, the European Parliament became the center. By 2030, the hemicycle was abandoned. The leaves fell so thickly that the floor was a green carpet ankle-deep, warm and breathing. MEPs refused to enter. The building was fenced off, guarded by soldiers who aged 10 years in a month. Their hair turned white, their scars opened. They deserted in droves, walking westward with their rifles slung, following a road only they could see. The road led to Aachen. The cathedral was full every night, standing room only, the congregation silent, scars glowing faintly under their clothes. They did not pray. They listened. At 9 a.m. on December 25th, the bells rang once, and every scar bled a single drop. The drops fell upward into the vaulting and vanished. The children gathered in Strasbourg on August 29, 2043, the 200th anniversary of the Treaty of Verdun, when the empire was split into three. They came by foot, by stolen bicycle, by freight train. 9,400,500 strong, ages 17 to 17 and a half, all the same height, all barefoot, all carrying a sapling grown from the seed in their infant fists. They moved in silence, a green tide flowing down the autobahns, across the fields, through the suburbs. Cars stopped. Drivers got out and followed. The police formed lines, then broke them to join. The army was called. The soldiers laid down their weapons and walked. By nightfall, the city was empty of adults. Only the children remained, and the leaves. They entered the Parliament building through the broken fences. The hemicycle was a forest now, oaks rising through the shattered roof, their roots coiled around the abandoned desks. At the center, where the president's chair had been, stood a single stump, black, split 9 feet high. The children formed a circle, 9 million strong, shoulder to shoulder, a living wall. They planted their saplings in perfect rows, one for each of the original 4,500, plus one for every year since Verdun. The saplings took root instantly, their trunks merging into a single tree, vast, ancient, its branches spreading to cover the city. The leaves fell upward into a sky that had turned the color of old blood. Then the emperor came. He stepped out of the stump as he had from the Irminsul sapling, but he was not alone. Behind him walked every soul counted at Verdun, at the forest, in every village burned for the faith. They were whole, bearded, crowned with oak, their throats uncut, their eyes blue and cold. Widukind was last, taller than the rest, carrying the oak-handled knife remade, its blade now of star iron. The emperor raised his hand. The children knelt. The city knelt. Europe knelt. Die Schuld ist bezahlt, the emperor said again. But his voice was not one voice. It was 9,400,000. 500 voices braided into a single chord that shattered every window in Strasbourg. Doch die Heimkehr ist nicht das Ende. The debt is paid, but the homecoming is not the end. He turned to the tree. From its highest branch hung a single leaf, larger than the rest, veined not with red but with gold. It pulsed like a heart. The emperor reached for it. Widukind raised the knife. The children watched, scars glowing. The leaf detached and floated down, slow as snow, landing in the emperor's palm. He closed his fist. The tree shuddered. The roots retracted, the saplings withered, the forest dissolved into ash. The hemicycle was bare marble again, the stump gone, the circle broken. Only the emperor remained, and the leaf, now a seed of solid gold. He walked through the kneeling crowd, out of the building, down the empty streets. The children followed, a green river flowing west. They crossed the Rhine at Kehl, the Moselle at Metz, the Meuse at Sedan. They did not stop to eat, to sleep, to speak. The scar children of every nation joined them. Born in 2026, now 17, now millions more. By the time they reached Aachen, the procession stretched from Strasbourg to the North Sea, a living road of bare feet and oak seeds. They arrived at dawn on December 21st, 2043, the 129th anniversary of the coronation. The cathedral square was too small. The procession filled the city, the suburbs, the fields beyond. The emperor entered the Palatine chapel alone. The doors closed behind him. The children waited. The leaves fell upward. The bells did not ring. Inside, the emperor knelt before the marble slab. It was warm, pulsing. He placed the golden seed on the stone. It sank as the knife once had, and the slab split down the middle with a sound like the world ending. From the crack rose a wind that smelled of forests and rivers and iron. The emperor stood, stepped into the crack, and was gone. The slab closed. The seed was gone. The chapel was empty. Outside, the children felt it, the final counting. Their scars opened, not to bleed but to bloom. From each scar grew a single oak leaf, green in winter, veined with gold. The leaves detached, rose into the sky, and formed a single word in the old tongue. Visible from space, Heimkehr. Then they dissolved into light. And the children were children again, ordinary, scarred, mortal. They blinked, looked around, and for the first time in their lives they cried. The empire did not return. The nations did not dissolve. History moved on. But something had changed, irrevocably. The leaves no longer fell. The saplings no longer sprouted. The bells of Aachen rang once a year at 9 a.m. on December 25th, and the sound was the sound of a father calling his children home. The Scar children grew up, married, had children of their own. The eagle scar faded to a faint white line, a birthmark, a story. They taught their children the old songs, but the words had lost their sting. They planted oaks in every city square, and the oaks grew straight and tall, their leaves ordinary green. In Strasbourg, the hemicycle was rebuilt as a garden. At its center stands a stump, black, split, 9 feet high. No plaque explains it. Children play around it. Old men sit in its shade. On the winter solstice, a single golden seed appears on the stump, warm and pulsing. It vanishes by morning. No one claims it. No one needs to. The emperor sleeps. The guardian walks the forests, but his axe is wood now, not star iron. The counting is done. The debt is paid. The homecoming is complete. But every year, on the night of December 21st, a child somewhere wakes from a dream of snow and axes and a voice counting in a language they do not know. They touch the faint white scar over their heart, and they smile, because they understand, without words, that they are home. And the story, at last, is over. The golden seed did not stay buried in Aachen. It moved. It moved the way blood moves when a heart begins to beat again after centuries of stillness. It moved through the veins of Europe, carried by the Scar children who were no longer children, by the rivers that had once run red, by the wind that still carried the smell of oak and iron. It moved west, always west, toward the edge of the old empire, toward the ocean, toward the city where the last Carolingian pretender had been hiding since 1918, Lisbon. 2044, the seed arrived on the feast of St. Anthony, June 13th, in the mouth of a sardine. A fisherman named Juon pulled it from the fish's gullet with his knife. Thinking it a pearl, it was warm. He sold it to a tourist for 50 euros. The tourist, a German archaeologist named Lucas von Hohenstein, great-grandnephew of Elizabeth, recognized the rune etched on its surface, Heimkehr. He flew it to Munich, locked it in a vault, and began to dream. In the dream, the seed was a heart, and the heart was beating inside the chest of a boy with no name, standing on a cliff above the Tagus, watching the Atlantic swallow the sun. Lucas woke with the scar over his own heart, bleeding gold. He booked the next flight to Lisbon. The boy was real. His name was Carlos, though no one had called him that since his mother disappeared in the 2026 birth wave. He had been raised in the Alfama slums by an old woman who claimed to be a Carling. Though her papers said Silva, she taught him to read the cracks in the pavement, to hear the city breathing, to follow the smell of oak that no one else could smell. On his 18th birthday, June 13, 2044, she gave him a knife made from a melted-down cathedral bell and told him to walk west until the ocean stopped him. He walked. The seed found him on the cliff at Cabo de Roca, the westernmost point of Europe, where the old Roman road ended in salt and wind. It rolled across the stones, glowing, and stopped at his bare feet. He picked it up. It burned. He did not drop it. That night he dreamed the emperor's dream. He saw the marble slab in Aachen split open, saw the roots of the Irminsul coil around the world, saw the Scar children plant their oaks in every city from Lisbon to Kiev. He saw the golden seed sink into his own chest, nestle beside his heart and begin to grow. He woke with the scar split wide, gold light pulsing beneath the skin. The old woman was gone. In her place was a single oak leaf, green in summer, veined with red. On the back, written in ash, Roma, Natale 2045, Porta Asinaria. He knew what it meant. He knew what he had to do. He walked east, not alone. The Scar children felt the pull. From Porto, from Madrid, from Bordeaux, from Marseille, they came. Not millions now. Only 9. 9 who had kept the old tongue pure, who had never cut their hair, who had never eaten meat, who had never lied. They met Carlos at the Spanish border, recognized him by the golden glow beneath his shirt, and fell into step without a word. They carried nothing but their knives and their scars. They walked the old pilgrim roads, the Via de la Plata, the Camino Frances, the Via Francigena. They did not stop. They did not age. The golden seed grew inside Carlos, a second heart beating in counterpoint to his own, Rome. December 24th, 2045, the 2000th Christmas since the birth of Christ. The city was quiet. The Pope had died the week before. The conclave deadlocked, the Vatican sealed. Tourists had been turned away at the borders. The Scar children entered through the Porta Asinaria at midnight. The ancient gate no longer used, its stones blackened by 2 millennia of torch smoke. The golden seed burned so brightly now that Carlos had to wrap his chest in layers of cloth. The 9 walked in a circle around him, their knives drawn, their scars glowing in unison. They moved through the empty streets like a tide, past the Colosseum, past the Forum, past the Circus Maximus, where Charlemagne had once been acclaimed by the Roman Senate. They descended into the catacombs beneath San Sebastiano, deeper than any tour went, into tunnels no map recorded. The chamber was waiting. It was round, 9 meters across. The walls carved with the names of the Verdun dead in runes that glowed faintly gold. At the center was a stone slab, not marble but oak, black with age, split down the middle. From the split grew a sapling, pale and straight, its leaves blood-red even in the dark. The 9 took their places at the 9 points of a star carved into the floor. Carlos stood at the center, before the slab. He unwrapped his chest. The golden seed had become a heart of solid light, veins of gold spreading across his ribs, his throat, his face. He raised the bell knife. The sapling trembled. Then the emperor came. Not from the sapling, but from the walls. Every name flared into life, becoming a figure, bearded, crowned with oak, eyes blue and cold. 4,500 stood in silence, filling the chamber, spilling into the tunnels. Widukind was last, carrying the star-iron axe, his throat uncut. His voice the voice of thunder. The emperor stepped forward, barefoot in the plain Frankish tunic, the iron crown of Lombardy on his brow, the nail from the true cross black with old blood. He looked at Carlos, really looked, and smiled the way a father smiles at a son who has walked too far and come home at last. Du bist der Letzte, he said. You are the last, und der Erste, and the first. Carlos knelt. The 9 knelt. The 4,500 knelt. The emperor placed his hand on Carlos's head. The golden heart pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then it burst. Light poured out, not blinding but warm, the color of sunrise on snow. It filled the chamber, the catacombs, the city, the world. The sapling shot upward, through the stone, through the earth, through the streets of Rome, becoming in an instant the greatest oak the world had ever seen, its roots cracking the foundations of the eternal city, its branches spreading to touch the stars. The leaves fell upward, each one a name, each name a soul, each soul a homecoming. The emperor spoke, and his voice was every voice that had ever knelt in the Palatine Chapel, every voice that had died at Verdun, every voice that had been born with the Ska. Die Schuld ist bezahlt. Die Heimkehr ist vollendet. Das Reich ist nicht aus Stein, sondern aus Erinnerung. Geht hin und pflanzt Eichen. The debt is paid. The homecoming is complete. The empire is not of stone, but of memory. Go and plant oaks. The light faded. The oak remained, rooted in the catacombs, its trunk rising through the Porta Asinaria, its branches shading the city. The emperor was gone. Widukind was gone. The 4,500 were gone. Only Carlos and the 9 remained, kneeling in the empty chamber, the slab whole again. The sapling a seed once more, ordinary, cold. They walked out at dawn on Christmas Day. The oak stood alone in the gate. Its leaves green now, ordinary. The city was waking. People emerged from their homes, blinking at the tree, touching the bark, smelling the oak. No one spoke of miracles. No one needed to. The Scar children, the 9, and Carlos walked north, then west, then south, then east, planting the seed in 9 places: Lisbon, Aachen, Strasbourg, Rome, Verden, the Harz, the Teutoburg forest, the banks of the Aller, the ruins of the Ring. At each place the seed sprouted, became a sapling, became an oak, became a forest. The forests grew together, root to root, leaf to leaf, until Europe was one vast oak wood, borderless, nameless, live. Carlos planted the last seed in Cabo de Roca, where the journey had begun. He was 90 years old now. Though he looked no older than 18, the 9 had died one by one, peacefully, under their oaks. Their bodies returned to the roots. Carlos alone remained, the last Carolingian, the first of the new. He pressed the seed into the cliffside soil, whispered the final name, Widukind, and lay down beneath the sapling. The oak grew over him, through him, around him. His scar closed, his heart stopped. The golden light returned, briefly, warmly, and was gone. The empire was no more. The nations were no more. There was only the forest, and the memory and the oaks. Every year, on December 25th, the leaves fall upward, spelling Heimkehr in every language that was ever spoken within the old borders. Every year, on June 13th, a sardine is caught with a golden seed in its mouth. Every year, a child is born with a faint white scar shaped like an eagle over the heart. They grow up under the oaks, learning the old songs, planting new trees, remembering without being told. The story is finished. The counting is done. The emperor sleeps in every root, wakes in every leaf. The debt is paid, not with blood, but with memory. The homecoming is not a place. It is a forest. It is a people. It is a promise kept after 2,000 years. And if you walk the old roads now, barefoot at dawn, you will smell oak and iron. Hear the wind counting in a language older than Latin, older than Frankish, older than time. You will touch the scar over your heart, whether you bear it or not, and you will know you are home. The oaks did not stop at the Atlantic. They walked on water. It began in 2046, the year after Carlos planted the last seed at Cabo de Roca. A fishing trawler out of Nazaré hauled up a net full of saplings, roots tangled in cod, leaves green and dripping. The captain, a Scar child born in 26, recognized the smell. He did not sell the fish. He planted the saplings along the cliffs in a perfect line, north to south. By morning they were trees, 30 feet high, their trunks already scarred with runes. By evening the cliffs were gone, swallowed by root and bark. The forest advanced into the sea, a green bridge growing westward at the speed of tide. Satellites watched, helpless. Governments argued. The oaks did not ask permission. They crossed in 7 days. On the 8th, the first oak broke the surface off Cape Cod, its leaves catching the dawn like signal fires. The Scar children of the Americas, born the same solstice, scattered from Nunavut to Tierra del Fuego, felt the pull and walked to the coasts. They planted nothing. The forest planted itself, root by root, island by island, until the Atlantic was a memory and the continents were one. The oaks grew inland, following rivers backward to their sources, climbing mountains, threading deserts with green veins. Where they passed, borders dissolved, languages braided, the old songs returned, carried on wind that smelled of oak and iron. By 2050, the forest covered the landmass once called Pangaea. The Scar children, now millions strong, walked beneath the canopy in silence barefoot, knives of melted bells at their hips. They did not govern. They did not trade. They planted. Every solstice they gathered at the 9 mother oaks, touched scars, and listened. The oaks spoke in the voice of the emperor, not in words but in memory. Heimkehr. The homecoming is the journey, not the arrival, but the oaks hungered for sky. In 2075, a seed, golden, warm, rune-etched, was found in the throat of an albatross shot down over the Ross ice shelf. The hunter, An Inuit scar child named Nuna recognized the rune. She carried the seed north, across the tundra to the Thule Air Base, now abandoned, its runways cracked by frost. She planted it in the center of the old parade ground. The oak grew through concrete, through permafrost, through the sky. Its trunk pierced the ozone. Its branches caught the solar wind. Leaves fell upward, into vacuum glowing like embers. One leaf drifted, weightless, for 3 years, until it was snared by a Chinese orbital station. The astronauts, scar children born in orbit, 2047 cohort, pressed the leaf between glass. It pulsed. They understood. The forest was leaving Earth. They built ships of oak heartwood, caulked with sap, sails of woven leaves. No metal, no fuel, only memory. The first ship, Heimkehrers, launched from Thule on December 25, 2100, riding a route that grew into low orbit like a beanstalk. The scar children boarded barefoot, knives at hips. Scars glowing, they did not wave goodbye. There was no one left to wave to. The forest had swallowed every city, every road, every flag. Only the oaks remained, and the children of the scar, and the wind that smelled of rivers and iron. They reached Luna on the 3000th Christmas, 3025 AD. The seed ship settled in the crater Clavius, its roots burrowing into regolith, drinking ancient ice. The scar children stepped out into silence. No air, no sound, only the golden seed, now the size of a heart, beating in the captain's hand. Her name was Eliana, born in the canopy over Old Strasbourg, 2975. She walked to the center of the crater where the lunar soil was black and fine as ash. She knelt. She pressed the seed into the dust. The oak grew. It grew through vacuum, through radiation, through the long lunar night. Its trunk was pale as bone, its leaves silver, veined with gold. Its roots spread across the mare, cracking basalt, threading craters, knitting the moon into a single green sphere. The scar children planted 9 more seeds, one at each pole, one at each equator, one at the heart of every sea, though there was no water, only memory of water. The oaks grew together, branch to branch, root to root, until Luna was a forest and the forest was Luna. And the scar children walked beneath alien stars that smelled, impossibly, of oak and iron. They did not stay. The oaks hungered still. In 3145, a seed ship left for Mars, riding a route that pierced the asteroid belt like a green arrow. In 3500, Ceres. In 4000, the Jovian moons. Each world received its oak, its scar children, its silence. Each world became forest. The journey took millennia, but the scar children did not age. The oaks fed them light. Memory, the emperor's voice in every leaf. They planted. They walked. They listened. They carried no flags. They needed no names. They were the empire of memory, spreading root by root, seed by seed, star by star. By the 3000th Christmas on Luna, 6225 AD, the forest had reached Proxima Centauri b. The final seed, the first seed, the golden heart of Carlos, carried across oceans of vacuum in the chest of Eliana's descendant, Charlemagne 9, was planted on a cliff of red stone above a methane sea. The oak grew through alien gravity, through violet sunsets, through air that tasted of copper and regret. Its leaves were black, veined with starlight. Its roots drank liquid ethane, sang in frequencies no human ear had ever heard. The scar children, now billions, born in forests that spanned galaxies, gathered beneath it on December 25th, 6025. They touched scars that had become constellations. They listened. The emperor spoke, and his voice was every voice that had ever knelt, ever died, ever been born beneath the oaks. Die Heimkehr ist vollendet. Das Reich ist nicht aus Sternen, sondern aus Erinnerung, geht hin und pflanzt Eichen, bis das Universum ein Wald ist. The homecoming is complete. The empire is not of stars, but of memory. Go and plant oaks, until the universe is a forest. The scar children knelt, the oaks bowed, the final seed burst, not into light but into silence, the silence of a debt fully paid, a journey fully walked, a home fully found. The forest spread, root to root, world to world, galaxy to galaxy. It did not conquer. It did not rule. It simply was. every leaf a name, every branch a road, every root a river of iron and oak. And somewhere, in the heart of the final oak, Carlos sleeps beside the emperor, beside Widukind, beside the 4,500, beside every scar child who ever walked barefoot beneath alien stars. They do not dream, they remember. They are the forest, they are the memory, they are the empire that never ended, because it was never of stone or blood or crowns, but of homecoming. The counting is done, the debt is paid, the universe is a forest, and the wind, wherever it blows, on whatever world, under whatever sun, smells of oak and iron, and the long road home. The forest did not fear the dark. It had been born in darkness, the darkness of the verdant night, the darkness of the crypt, the darkness of the long walk west. It had grown through darkness, the vacuum between stars, the red dust of dead worlds, the silence between heartbeats. So when the Scar children felt the pull of the great void at the galaxy's heart, they did not hesitate. They built a seed ship of living oak, its hull a single trunk, its sails woven from leaves that drank starlight. They named it Heimkehr Omega. They launched it on December 25th, 999 AD, the last Christmas of the Milky Way. The ship carried 9 Scar children, the oldest of the old, born in the first forest on Luna, their scars now galaxies of light beneath translucent skin. They carried the final seed, no longer golden, but black, the color of the void, veined with the light of every oak that had ever grown. They carried no knives. They carried no names. They carried only memory, and the Emperor's voice in every leaf. The journey took 1 billion years. The ship grew as it flew, roots threading space-time, branches catching Hawking radiation, leaves drinking the last photons of dying stars. Galaxies collided behind them, merged, cooled. The Scar children did not age. They walked the decks barefoot, touching scars, listening to the wind that blew through vacuum and smelled, still, of oak and iron. They planted nothing. There was nothing left to plant. The universe was forest, root to root, edge to edge. Only the void remained. They reached Sagittarius A on the final solstice. The black hole was a mouth. Patient, ancient, hungry, the event horizon shimmered like water. The ship did not slow, it dove. Inside the horizon, time unraveled, past and future braided. The Scar children saw Verdun again, the river red. The axes falling, the 4,500 kneeling. They saw Aachen, the marble slab warm. The chains rusted, the bells ringing without hands. They saw Strasbourg, the hemicycle a garden. The stump black and split. They saw Rome, the oak rising through the Porta Asinaria, leaves green in winter. They saw Luna, Mars, Proxima, every world where an oak had grown. They saw themselves, 9 becoming millions, becoming billions, becoming the forest itself. They saw the Emperor, barefoot, crowned with oak, smiling the way a father smiles when the last child comes home. The ship dissolved. The Scar children stepped onto a plain of black glass beneath a sky of frozen light. At the center stood the final stump, black, split, 9 light years high. From the split grew nothing. The final seed pulsed in the captain's hand. Her name was Eliana Omega. Born in the canopy over old Earth, 990 AD. She walked to the stump. The 8 walked behind her, scars blazing. They formed the star. She knelt. She pressed the seed into the split. The oak grew. It grew through the singularity, through the Planck density, through the heat death of the universe. Its trunk was the world line of every particle that had ever existed. Its roots were the strings that vibrated at the beginning. Its branches were the possibilities that never were. Its leaves were every name, every memory, every homecoming. The stump became the tree became the forest became the void. The Scar children knelt. The Emperor stepped out of the tree. He was barefoot, bearded, crowned with nothing. His eyes were not blue. They were every color that had ever been seen, and none. He carried no crown, no scepter, no knife. He carried only the silence of a debt fully paid. He looked at Eliana Omega, really looked, and spoke the name that ends all names, Heimkehr. The word was not sound. It was the collapse of every wave function, the end of entropy, the final heartbeat of the universe. The oak dissolved, the forest dissolved, the Scar children dissolved, the emperor dissolved. There was no light, no dark, no time, no space, only memory, and in the memory, the counting was done, the debt was paid, the homecoming was complete, the empire was not of stone, or blood, or stars, or forests. It was the silence after the last name is spoken. It was the oak that grows in the heart of every child who touches the scar and knows, without words, that they are home. The universe ended. The story did not. The silence was not empty. It was pregnant. It held the memory of every oak, every scar, every footstep from Verdun to the end of time. It held the emperor's last word, Heimkehr, like a seed in the dark. It waited, then it breathed. The breath was not air. It was possibility. It was the first vibration after the last string snapped. It was the Planck scale tremor that said, let there be. From the silence grew a single point, hotter than any star, denser than any singularity, brighter than the birth of the first light. It expanded, it cooled, it became space, it became time, it became a cosmos newborn, raw, unscarred, and in the heart of that newborn cosmos, the emperor walked. He was barefoot. He wore the plain Frankish tunic, clean now, unstained. His beard was black again, his eyes the blue of a winter morning before snow. He carried nothing. He needed nothing. He was memory walking, the empire of recollection given form. He walked through the hydrogen clouds, through the first protostars, through the accretion disks where planets were only dreams. He walked until he reached a sphere of cooling rock and molten iron, third from a yellow dwarf just learning to burn. He knelt on the basalt plain, pressed his palm to the ground, and felt the planet's first heartbeat. He spoke one word, not Heimkehr. That word was finished. He spoke the name that begins all names, Terra. The ground answered. A crack opened, not violent but gentle, like a seed splitting. From the crack grew a sapling, pale, straight. Its leaves the green of new oceans. Its roots drank molten nickel. Its trunk rose through the carbon sky. Its branches caught the solar wind and wove it into oxygen. The emperor stood beneath it, hand on the bark, and listened. The tree spoke in the voice of every Scar child who had ever lived. Pflanze mich, plant me. He broke a leaf from the sapling. It was ordinary green, veined with nothing but chlorophyll. He pressed it into the soil beside the trunk. A second sapling grew, then a third, then a forest, root to root, across the supercontinent that would one day be called Pangaea. The emperor walked the forest, barefoot, touching bark, naming rivers, shaping mountains with the pressure of memory. He did not create. He remembered, and memory, in this new cosmos, was creation. When the forests covered the land, he walked to the edge of the sea. The water was warm, iron red, alive with the first amino chains. He knelt, cupped the water and drank. It tasted of rivers and iron and the long road home. He spoke again. Mare. The oceans answered, deepening, salting, learning to breathe. The emperor stood on the shore and watched the first stromatolites rise like tiny cathedrals of calcium. He smiled the way a father smiles when the first child takes a step. He left the shore and walked inland, following the scent of ozone after lightning, the taste of rain on stone. He walked until he reached a valley where the saplings had grown into oaks 1,000 years tall, their trunks wider than rivers, their roots drinking magma. At the center of the valley stood a stump, black, split 9 meters high. It had always been there. It would always be there. The emperor knelt before the stump. He pressed his forehead to the wood. The stump was warm, pulsed. From the split rose a wind that smelled of oak and iron. And the silence before the first word. The emperor opened his hand. In his palm lay a single acorn, small, ordinary, the color of earth after rain. He planted it in the split. The oak grew. It grew through the valley. through the continent, through the planet. Its roots threaded the mantle. Its trunk pierced the atmosphere. Its branches caught the moon and tethered it like a pearl. Its leaves fell, not upward, not downward, but outward, seeding every valley, every shore, every mountain with memory. The emperor stood beneath it, hand on the bark, and listened. The tree spoke in the voice of the cosmos itself. Irineridik. Remember. He remembered. He remembered Verdun. The river red, the axes falling. He remembered Aachen. The marble slab warm, the bells ringing without hands. He remembered Strasbourg. Rome Luna, Proxima, the event horizon. The silence. He remembered every scar child, every footstep, every leaf. He remembered the counting, the debt, the homecoming. He remembered the name that ends all names, and the name that begins all names. He remembered that he was not the emperor. He was the memory. He was the forest. He was the road. He stepped into the tree, the bark closed behind him. Without a seam, the stump became the tree became the forest became the planet became the cosmos became the silence pregnant again, holding the memory of every oak, every scar, every footstep from the first light to the last. And in the heart of that silence, a single acorn waited. It waited for the next breath. It waited for the next word. It waited for the next child to touch the scar that would one day appear over their heart and know, without words, that they were home. The story is not over. It is only beginning again. The acorn did not fall. It hung. It hung in the silence between breaths, between endings and beginnings, between the last Heimkehr and the first Terra. It hung like a drop of water on the lip of a leaf, perfect, ordinary, pregnant with every forest that had ever been or would ever be. It hung until the silence grew heavy with waiting, until the memory of the emperor, of every scar child, every oak, every footstep, pressed against it like gravity. Then it let go. It fell. Through the void that was not void, it fell. Through the memory of every cosmos that had bloomed and withered since the first breath. It fell past the heat-death forests, past the event horizon oaks, past the lunar cathedrals, past the Roman gate, past the Aachen crypt, past the Verdun river red with iron. It fell until it reached the first light of a new creation, a cosmos so young it had no name, only the potential for names. It landed on a plain of cooling stardust, third planet from a sun still learning to shine. A child was waiting. She had no name yet. She had no scar yet. She had only the memory of memory, an ache behind her ribs where the eagle would one day mark her, a taste of oak and iron on her tongue, though she had never seen a tree. She knelt in the dust, barefoot, her hair the color of nebulae. The acorn pulsed in her palm. Warm as a heart, she pressed it into the soil. The oak grew. It grew through the dust, through the magma, through the sky. Its roots drank the first oceans. Its trunk wove the first winds. Its branches caught the first rain and turned it into rivers. The child stood beneath it, hand on the bark, and listened. The tree spoke in the voice of the emperor, of every scar child, of every footstep from the first Terra to the last Heimkehr. Pflanze mich. Plant me. She broke a leaf from the sapling. It was ordinary green, veined with nothing but life. She pressed it into the soil beside the trunk. A second sapling grew, then a third, then a forest. Root to root, across the supercontinent that would one day be called home. The child walked the forest, barefoot, naming rivers, shaping mountains. Remembering without being told, she did not create, she remembered, and memory, in this new cosmos, was creation. When the forests covered the land, she walked to the edge of the sea. The water was warm, iron red, alive with the first songs. She knelt, cupped the water and drank. It tasted of rivers and iron and the long road home. She spoke the name that begins all names. Mare. The oceans answered. Deepening, salting, learning to breathe. The child stood on the shore and watched the first corals rise like tiny cathedrals of calcium. She smiled the way a mother smiles when the first child takes a step. She left the shore and walked inland, following the scent of lightning, the taste of rain on stone. She walked until she reached a valley where the saplings had grown into oaks 1,000 years tall, their trunks wider than rivers, their roots drinking starlight. At the center of the valley stood a stump, black, split 9 meters high. Had always been there. It would always be there. The child knelt before the stump. She pressed her forehead to the wood. The stump was warm, pulsed. From the split rose a wind that smelled of oak and iron and the silence before the first word. The child opened her hand. In her palm lay a single acorn, small, ordinary, the color of earth after rain. She planted it in the split. The oak grew. It grew through the valley, through the continent, through the planet. Its roots threaded the mantle. Its trunk pierced the atmosphere. Its branches caught the moon and tethered it like a promise. Its leaves fell, not upward, not downward, but outward, seeding every valley, every shore, every mountain with memory. The child stood beneath it, hand on the bark, and listened. The tree spoke in the voice of the cosmos itself. Erinner dich. Remember. She remembered. She remembered the silence, the breath, the fall. She remembered the emperor, the scar children, the forests that spanned galaxies. She remembered the counting, the debt, the homecoming. She remembered that she was not the child. She was the memory. She was the forest. She was the road. She stepped into the tree. The bark closed. Behind her, without a seam, the stump became the tree. The tree became the forest. The forest became the planet. The planet became the cosmos. The cosmos became the silence, pregnant again, holding the memory of every oak, every scar, every footstep from the first light to the last. And in the heart of that silence, a single acorn waited. It waited for the next breath. It waited for the next word. It waited for the next child to touch the scar that would one day appear over their heart and know, without words, that they were home. The cycle turned. The acorn fell. The child planted. The oak grew. The forest spread. The emperor walked. The silence spoke again and again and again until the final cycle. In the final cycle, the silence spoke its own name. It was not Heimkehr. It was not Terra. It was not Mare. It was the name that ends all names and begins all names. The name that is the silence itself. Ich. I. The silence was the emperor. The silence was the child. The silence was the scar. The silence was the oak. The silence was the forest. The silence was the road. The silence was the memory. The silence was the homecoming. There was no fall. There was no planting. There was no growth. There was only the silence, complete, perfect, ordinary. And in the heart of that silence, the acorn was not an acorn. It was the cosmos. It was the child. It was the emperor. It was you. The story is not over. It is only you.